So may I start with you, Mr. van der Beek?
Okay, thank you. Well, we are here today to discuss the, let's say, interaction between human trafficking and humanitarian aid. And I wish to lift the entire discussion to a somewhat higher level of abstraction and focus on something which I believe is lying underneath this question. And that's the kind of conflict which is going on between, on the one hand, our European moral self-image, so to speak, in which human rights and, in particular, the right to asylum are key elements. And on the other hand, the fact that asylum migration potentially is a very large burden for European receiving countries. Potentially, I say. So on the one hand, it's understandable that people from, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa would like to come to Europe because we are wealthy. We have many things to offer, freedom included, and also things like welfare state. So that's understandable. And it's also understandable that people representing, let's say, NGOs are reasoning from that self-image of human rights, etc., are in a way consistent when helping those people, either legally or illegally. But on the other hand, there's the fact that, let's say, the harsh reality that integrating migrants, asylum migrants, into our society, into our, let's say, labor market, and also the educational system turns out to be quite hard. And also, there's, let's say, it's also a numbers thing. Simply look at the total population of the absorbing countries in Europe, which are in total 400 million people roughly, and let's say the asylum migration source area, which is currently counting over 2 billion people, but by the end of the century will be totaling up to, let's say, roughly 6 billion people, according to United Nations forecast. And so there's rapid population growth going on, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, which is, as we know, population growth is related to youth bulges, and youth bulges are related to things like fragile states, instability, internal conflict, civil war, etc. So let's say the production side of, when we look at the production side of asylum migrants, well, we may expect an increase in the future due to both population growth and the fact that population growth in itself creates instability. And then we are here in the Dutch Parliament, so I want to focus on the effects for the Dutch economy, the Dutch society. When we simply look only at the labor market and educational system, well, the labor market, for every 100 asylum migrants coming to the Netherlands at the age between 20 and 40 years, so in the prime of life, so to speak, after 10 years, for every 100 working persons, there's 110 people on benefits for Asian asylum migrants and 180 for, let's say, typical African source countries like Somalia, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So that's when it comes to the labor market. And when it comes to educational system, we see that there's quite a large educational disadvantage, especially for asylum children coming from sub-Saharan Africa. And since educational attainment is directly linked to later labor market performance, and that's in itself a very strong predictor for the fiscal cost and benefits of migration, this is quite worrying, so to speak. And so to wrap everything up, we have, on the one hand, we have, let's say, that moral self-image, and on the other hand, the harsh reality of integrating immigrants. And I think that politicians should think about choices to make, fundamental choices to make, either seeing asylum migration as a form of, let's say, a costly form of charity, or a kind of, make another choice and admit that probably this burden is too large for Europe, especially in the future, and we must make more fundamental choices in which we somehow limit our responsibility, for example, by limiting the right to asylum to, let's say, geographical Europe or something like that. So that's, in short, my...
Thank you, Mr. van der Beek.
Thank
I
you.
like your presentation. You end up with a statement that will give some need for discussion, undoubtedly.